Thank you for your courage. Our country is better off for having you here. I want to start my questions by debunking a couple pernicious stereotypes. First, when it comes to drug trafficking, CBP reports that over 83% of smuggled fentanyl, heroin, and methamphetamine is discovered during vehicle inspections at ports of entry where people enter the country legally. Not smuggled by migrants, but driven across the border by U.S. citizens engaged in criminal activity at ports of entry. Judge Samaniego, the fentanyl crisis is real, but how is it really entering the country in your experience, and who is doing the smuggling?
Well, as you said, Congressman, they're coming in through the port of entries. We do not get a lot of information of migrants doing that. As I said earlier, the fact that they're not carrying much with them and the fact that they've been vetted as they come in when we process them. And that's why I keep insisting that an organized way of processing and our ability to be able to process properly is really helping tremendously. When we do not do that and it pushes the migrants who have to go further out, that's when you start having these illegal entries because there's not a way for them to come in properly and meet the Border Patrol there at the border. And so we know that going further creates risk for them. They get preyed on. There's so many things happen by not following the process. And when we're allowed to do it and we're supported and funded properly, I think we do a lot for our country.
Thank you, Judge. Second, relative to undocumented immigrants, and using Texas as an example, U.S.-born citizens in Texas are more than twice as likely to be arrested for violent crimes and 2.5 times more likely to be arrested for drug crimes. Judge Samaniego, can you speak to the experiences and interactions you've had with migrant families and asylum seekers at the border? What is the real-life impact that such anti-migrant rhetoric and misinformation have on these communities?
Well, it's heartbreaking. Obviously, that why they're coming in, they want to work. I'll give you an example. We've had individuals that were held back because they got caught up in, not being able to go back because of Title 42. And they were asking for, give us brooms, give us bags. We want to help us. We do not want to be perceived as lingering or burdening your community or any part of the country. And they talk a lot about the fact that they're wanting to work. They're passionate about working, and they're ready to do something for our country. We do not get, I interact with them completely. I work with the unaccompanied children, and I have a lot of exposure, and I feel extremely confident that the majority of them have no interest in drugs or doing anything like that other than to work and to participate and be part of the dream that they're looking for. And a lot of them, like I said, they're coming out of desperation of how they're treated in their countries, how they're persecuted, and they're looking for a better life. I do not, I stand here saying, with all honesty, that I do not see or understand some of the things that are said here today about them wanting to be part of drug cartels or putting them in that situation. It's just completely opposed to what I've experienced there in El Paso.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Judge.
Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gates.
Yield to Mr. Roy. I thank the gentleman from Florida. I thank the witnesses for being here. I just want to clarify the record here for a second. The idea that the fact that fentanyl is caught at ports of entry and that is the only place that is coming through is belied by the facts, and is belied by the facts that the Border Patrol is now distracted processing human beings, just as the judge from El Paso just described, but just ignores the impact on what that does to the actual border. The Border Patrol can't possibly catch all of the fentanyl at the ports of entry, nor catch the fentanyl between the ports of entry. Mr. Daniels, do you agree with that assessment?
I do. We've had a depletion in Border Patrol because they've been taken to other areas where processing is more important.
And is it your experience that fentanyl pours in between the ports of entry and that fentanyl does in fact get into our communities in mass quantities today due to our open border?
Yes.
I appreciate that. Now, Mr. Dunn, obviously in the introduction, I talked about you being from the county in which I live, in Hays County. You testified, Mr. Dunn, earlier that it was not just Noah who passed away in Hays County last year due to fentanyl poisoning in our community. Is it not true that 3 other Hayes Independent School District students died from fentanyl overdoses in our community in Hayes County last summer? Is that accurate?
That's correct. And a fourth 14-year-old died in January of this year.
Just a couple of weeks ago?
Yes.
Another
And
family?
during the Christmas break, 6 other students were poisoned by fentanyl, but they were successfully saved.
And last summer, there were another 8 who were brought back through the use of Narcan. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Dunn, your lovely bride, Janelle, is Hispanic, yes?
Yes.
Do you believe that believing in a secure border makes one racist or anti-Hispanic?
Not in the slightest. Her family actually holds that same position.
I thank you for that. You guys have been active now in a number of organizations trying to get out and understand the lost voices of fentanyl. Is that right?
Yes.
Worked with Ms. Virginia Krieger.
Yes.
And she's lost her daughter due to Percocet that was laced with fentanyl. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the people that have been the lost faces of fentanyl, I've done this before. Noah is one of these lost voices due to fentanyl now.
He is now. I'm not sure if he's included in that picture.
And these pictures are the faces of Americans who are no longer with us due to fentanyl flowing throughout our communities. Now, these are young individuals who are not here today. Now, Noah's not here today. Do you care precisely whether or not fentanyl is coming through ports of entry or between ports of entry, or was your family directly impacted because fentanyl is flooding into our communities one way or the other?
However it gets here, it's here.
And in your experience talking to other family members and talking to law enforcement personnel, is it your observation and belief that the overwhelming flood at our borders, distracting Border Patrol from being able to carry out their duty to stop the flow between the ports of entry or do inspections at the ports of entry, is resulting in more fentanyl pouring into our communities that is then resulting in the death of Americans and, in fact, the death of migrants in the process?
Yes, most of the fathers that I speak with that are not as vocal as the mothers, the common thing they've expressed to me is to come up here and let people know that it's a border issue. It's not an immigration issue. It's flooding across the borders because there's a problem at the borders.
In your communication with families who have lost loved ones due to fentanyl poisonings, do you believe that it is an imperative that this country's federal government, who has a constitutional obligation to secure the border of the United States, do so in order to ensure that we stop the flow of fentanyl and dangerous and illicit narcotics into the United States, resulting in the death of Americans?
Yes.
Do you believe that if this country adopted policies that enabled us to restrict and stop the flow of fentanyl, and that includes ensuring that we have no longer a flood of human beings at our border, while still maintaining asylum laws and protecting people who are being persecuted under actual threat of persecution for their religious and political beliefs, do you believe that stopping the flow of individuals, enabling Border Patrol to stop fentanyl, that is a critical imperative, and if that were adopted, would help save lives like Noah's?
I do, and most others that I talk with feel the same way.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Thank you, Janelle. I yield back.
Time has expired. The gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.